Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this insane chess study. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. It is white to move and win. Now you might see, well, we have this pawn, surely we have to promote this pawn in some magical way. It's actually even winning, you might think. Now let's look at the options. Black has a rook that can possibly defend against the pawn. So for example, we play the move g7, which makes a lot of sense. We don't want the king to take it, and we don't want to waste time defending it, because if we try to defend it, he's going to take this pawn, some kind of push, king moves, queen promotion, rook sack, and bishop takes, and this is a draw. We don't want that. So it makes sense that the first move is going to be g7. Now, black cannot play this check, because after king to b2, black is unable to go to a8 to stop the pawn from promoting, because the bishop is defending. That's why after b7, there will be rook to c8, stopping the pawn from promoting here. Now, you might say, well, this is pretty easy, right? We just promote to a queen, we take the rook for the pawn, and then we win, right? The problem here that this pawn is a dark square pawn, and this bishop is a light square bishop. So this bishop is unable to protect the pawn on g3. So after g4, we cannot do much. This pawn cannot be saved in any kind of way. That's why we cannot do this move just yet. We need to gain some kind of a tempo. We need this pawn to be on a light square so that the bishop can defend it. Okay, so now it makes a lot of sense that it's not a king move, because after the king moves, he's going to be playing some kind of a king h6, going to try to win the pawn, and it's not going to be good for us. We have to make a forcing move, a good move, and that is the move g4. Now g4 is really, really cool. For example, if he takes the pawn on g4, we have bishop check, king moves somewhere, and then we take the rook. He cannot attack. We have, queen promotion, of course, and that's winning. So he cannot take, because we have the bishop here on e6, forking the rook. That's why he needs to move the rook away. The best move for black actually here is to play rook to b8. As you can see, restricting the enemy king, because white is unable to win this game without the help of the king, and now you're going to see why. So after rook to b8, still we cannot go for this pawn promotion, because rook takes, bishop takes, and we don't have time to go back to e3, sorry, to e6 to defend the pawn, because he would already have taken the pawn on g4. So we need to make a forcing move. We need to do something in this position, and we need to save this pawn. Of course, we cannot lose the pawn. So we play bishop to e6. Bishop to e6 is really nice. We are defending this pawn, and we're still maintaining the threat of this pawn promotion. Now black has many options. Let's see first what happens if he played, for example, king to g6. King to g6 is actually losing because of this, and after this, I mean, he cannot go back here. That's the problem with it. So after takes, king goes here, and the bishop will be able to go back to e6 to defend the pawn. That's why we played the move g4 in the beginning, remember? We wanted to gain a tempo against black because he could not take the pawn because of the check, and we win his rook, right? Now, so the black king is forced to stay near the pawn on g4 to meet the pawn promotion with a rook sacrifice, and after the bishop takes, black will be able to take the pawn because it is very close to the pawn, and that's going to be an immediate draw. But what if black decided to play, for example, let's see king to f6. Okay, we're going to look at all the options. It'll be a long video, but it's the most beautiful study ever, and we're not even into it yet. For example, a queen promotion here does not work because, I mean, rook takes, bishop takes, and he cannot really go here because the bishop can go back and still defend. So, king to g6, king to f6, the exact same thing. But what about crazy move, king to h6, attacking this pawn? What would you do here? If after this queen promotion, and then you think, okay, rook takes, bishop takes, king to g5, bishop here, and this is still winning for white because it's going to get in, defend the pawn, push the pawn, and make a queen, right? Wrong. In this position, after the queen promotion, black will not take the queen. Black will not take the queen in this position. Black will play check on b1. Of course, like this is not entirely, how can I say this? It's not entirely like 100% winning for white. There are, ways for white to mess this one up by thinking it's a draw. For example, we cannot take. That's an immediate draw because, as you can see, the black king cannot move, right? That's why we cannot take the rook. So we move up, check. We cannot even take with the bishop because the bishop is not restricting the enemy king. The pawn and the queen are doing so. So the king moves, check, here, check, here, check. It looks like it's just going to be a series of checks. King here, we do not have, sorry, black does not have, rook to b8. Not because if king takes, it's going to be a draw. Because if queen takes, now the king is able to move. So black plays rook to a7 check. King moves, check. Cannot take, that's a draw. King moves, check, moves, check, moves, check, moves. And the only reason that white wins this after the queen promotion, after the move king to b6, is that the white king can hide behind the bishop. That's the only reason that black loses this. Because after this check here, the king does not move, or the king does not take, or the bishop does not take. It is pawn takes, because the pawn is restricting the enemy king from moving. So black has one move, and that's going to be a checkmate. So now we discussed three options here for black. King to h6, which is losing because the queen promotion, and after take is going to be winning, and after a series of a lot of checks, it's still going to be winning. So it's not king h6, not king g6, not king f6. The black king is forced to stay near this pawn. So either king to h4, king to f4, does not matter. King f4. Now, we cannot push, we're going to lose it. We cannot make a queen, because if rook takes, bishop takes, we lose this pawn. So it's very obvious that we have to move the king. We move the king. Yes, the enemy, our king is actually restricted, but all we have to do is to go after the rook on b8 to try to get something. So now he cannot move the rook. The reason he cannot do so because the king can get closer. And once the king gets closer, it's going to be very easy for us to go and defend the pawn, and it's going to be winning. So he needs to restrict our movement of the king. So he goes back to g5. Remember, bishop, pawn, and pawn cannot do anything on their own. We need the king to get closer, and now we're just getting started. So after king to a3, king moves back. So the black king is forced to actually go up and down like this until we get close to the rook by playing a7. Now black here has two options, either d8 or e8. Other moves are just taking by the bishop and pawn and king, right? So either rook to d8 or rook to e8. Rook to d8 is not good because we can play king to b7. Remember, we need the king to get as close as possible and to try to defend the pawn to promote, and the bishop is already defending this pawn. We want to get the win. This is actually losing for black because these d8. Okay, so here black, for example, plays. King going back does not really actually work to attack the pawn. Let's see first. After king here, we have this move, king to c7. King moves back, and then it's just going to be, I think after queen promotion here, it's not a queen promotion, I guess, because if we made a queen, the enemy king cannot move, so that now he can play some series of checks. But again, as you saw in the exact same variation before, there is a square that can be defended, or the white king can evade to, which is f6, and then we can take with the pawn after any kind of check. Or yeah, I guess it's not going to actually a draw. Is it, though? Yeah, it's going to be a win. Now, this is not the variation. After this move, king to b7, it's very clear that we want to get close to attack the rook, help the pawn to promote. He cannot play this check because the bishop is actually stopping it. So, in this position, it plays like some kind of a rook to e8. Rook to e8, we attack the rook once more by playing bishop to f7. As you can see, the rook is very limited, so it gives either a check. We're going to look at the check first. This move is insane. And it doesn't really matter if, here, after we attack, if it went to d8 or e8, it's better for black to go e8 right away. Because after a rook to d8, the white king is just going to chase it until it goes to e8. So it's better for black to play e8. That's the best move. Okay, so now this move is not really threatening this bishop. What is really threatening is something very, very beautiful. Now, you might say, all we have to do is just to play king to b7 and get after this rook and just help support the pawn. Well, the difference between rook to d8 and rook e8 is that rook to d8, this move works because there is no check on d7 because of the bishop. But rook to e8, there is no king to b7 because there isn't no rook takes bishop. There is rook to e7 check. King moves up and rook takes pawn. Now the rook will be ready to sacrifice itself on, there. I mean, just take the pawn and that's a draw, right? That's why it doesn't work. So whenever we see this move, rook to e8, we have to play king to b6. King to b6. King to b6, I don't think that, no, sorry. King to b6 is actually losing because there's a check and it can go back. Sorry about that. It's not king to b6. In this position, it is the move bishop to f7 to attack the rook first. Yeah, I forgot about this, sorry. So after bishop to f7, attacking the rook, it seems like black is actually winning this. I mean, right? He's going to give a check and stuff. No, it's not even a draw. So black here has two options, either to play rook to e7 check or, rook d8, rook c8. Let's start first with this move, rook to e7 check. Okay, now we play king to b6, moving away. He cannot take here because we can promote. You know what can black do in this position? King to h6, attacking our pawn. Now you might say, well, easy, right? Promote to a queen. If we promote it to a queen, this is a draw. This is insane. The only difference between this position, this variation, and the variation I showed you before, where the bishop was on e6, that the white king can hide behind the bishop. But now, the white king cannot hide. Many checks are going to be happening. Bishop cannot take. That's, of course, not something good. That's a draw. King moves, check, move, check. It doesn't really matter. It's not really a win, whatever we do, because the king is unable to hide. Even if we win here, for example, we try to run away, the king is unable to hide. And this is actually forced. He needs to take, and that's stalemate. So that's the beauty. That's the beauty with the move king to h6. So after king to h6, you might say, well, okay, we don't promote to a queen. We do promotion to a rook. Now we're winning this, right? We're not winning this because if rook takes bishop, you might say, well, come on, dude, we have a pawn. We have an extra pawn. This is winning. It is not winning. The reason for that this black rook is, as you can see, works like a blockade. It's stopping the white king from defending this pawn. It's going to help him to promote. So, and the rook has to keep protecting this pawn, and after some series of checks, it's not going to be possible. He needs to move the rook or lose the pawn. So white is not going to be winning this when we make a rook. But instead, we promote to a knight after this rook to e7 check. king moves, I mean, if the king moves anywhere else, we just take this and then we just defend the pawn. That's pretty much easy, right? But he plays king to g5, trying to take this pawn. And after we take the rook, king takes. And let's be honest, I'm not saying that I'm Hikaru Nakamura and I can checkmate black with bishop and knight in just 12 seconds, but it is possible. This is a theoretical, checkmate. White is able to win this through checkmate, but, he needs to know how to checkmate with the bishop and the knight and needs to have time. But nonetheless, it is actually winning for white. But we're not going to discuss this. We're going to discuss something even more beautiful. Okay. So here we go back a little. After bishop to f7, really cool move. Black plays this check. It's going to be, after that, it's going to be this because we have to move the king away. But now black plays rook to d8. Rook to d8 is very obvious. We just want to move away. But we play king to b7. We're trying to get closer to attack the rook. Now you might say, dude, you gave up the pawn on g4. Well, we play king to c7, attacking the rook first. He does not have time to actually go after the pawn. And as you can see, the rook does not have any squares to go to except a8. So now, after rook to a8, what do we do with white? We play the most beautiful move, bishop to e6 check. Very, very beautiful idea. King moves anywhere, it doesn't really matter. We play bishop to c8. Now we're using this check, once black takes the pawn, to go back with the bishop, and then to restrict the rook vision of the pawn. Well, if you play this check, we don't move the king, we lose the pawn, and that's a draw. We block with the bishop, he attacks or something, it doesn't matter, we're going to promote to a queen, so that's going to be losing. Okay, so he does not take. Okay, if he doesn't take, what does he do? What does black do in this position? There is this move, as I showed you before, king to h6. King to h6, we cannot make a queen, or can we make a queen? Okay, after we make a queen, there will be rook takes. And after bishop takes, this is actually winning because after the king moves, there's bishop here. But as we discussed earlier, queen promotion, there will be checks. There will be checks, and this is actually a draw. This is actually a draw because, I mean, we cannot do anything. The white king cannot hide behind the pawns or behind the pieces. That's why it's not winning to promote to a queen. But what if we promote it to a rook? The exact same position, the exact same as before. Check takes the bishop, and this is still a draw. So what is happening here? King to h6, what will happen after this move? There will be absolutely no, trying to defend this pawn. King to c8, sorry, king to c7, attacking this. But there will be actually king takes here, and after takes, there will be king takes bishop, and we cannot defend the pawn. Okay. So after the move rook to d8, we actually play the move not king to b7, because king to b7, he can then play the move king to h6. But in this position, we play king to b6. Now you're going to see the difference. I'm still trying to memorize all of the variations because it took me a lot of time to actually understand the beauty of this position. And even after I make the video, there's going to be some variations that I actually missed. It's insane. So after king to b6, we're just trying to, get closer. Now, if you play this move king to h6, what's going to happen here? Now we can promote to a rook. The reason for that, there's a huge difference between king to b7 and king to b6. King to b7, after we promote to a rook, there is a check and we lose the bishop. But after king to b6, we promote to a rook and there is no check to win the bishop. So we still have an extra piece that can defend the pawn and the rook giving some checks. That's why there's a huge difference in this. So we promote to a rook. We don't promote to a queen. Queen is going to be the exact same thing. The king cannot hide behind the pieces. So there's going to be an endless checks. Black will be farming brilliant moves. So we don't do that. We promote to a rook. and he does not have a check. And if he takes, we just take, and after king here, we just defend, right? That's very obvious. Okay. So after king to h6, promotion to a rook. So after king to b6, and he did not play king to h6, for example, what does happen? What does happen in this position? There will be some kind of a, let's say, I mean, even the rook cannot move away because we can make a queen with a check. I mean, that's very obvious. The rook moves here. Then what do? We actually go, king to b7, we attack the rook one more time. He goes here, we attack it one more time by the rook to rook c7. The king goes, the rook goes back, and then in this position, I think we just play king to d7 though, right? King to d7. If he played this check, this is actually still no. Oh, I'm getting cooked. My brain is getting cooked. So hold on a second. How is this even possible? King to d7. King takes here. After this attack on the rook, he can just play this check. So it's not the right move. So after rook hides away on a8, oh, yes, in this position, after rook to a8, we do not attack it with the king. That's what I missed. We don't attack with the king. We attack with the bishop. He does not have time to go king takes g4, because then we just take the rook and promote. And as you can see, the black rook has very limited, I mean only one square, which is rook to e8. Okay. After rook to e8, we play another move, which is king here. King to d7, attack it again. Goes to the only square, which is here. And now what do we actually do? In this position, oh my god, this is nuts. This is nuts. Bishop to f7. The reason for this move is that whenever, for example, he goes king takes pawn now, it's not going to be good because we're going to have this move, king to c7, attacking the rook, goes to the only square. We play a check with the bishop. King moves away, and then we block. We block the rook, as I showed you before. But I just want to see something very interesting here. What if he did not take? What if he played king to h6? What does happen here? Well, I guess the exact same thing, because after we promote to a rook here, not a queen, after this check, we can move the king, right? And there, after after rook takes, king takes is not a stalemate because the king is still able to move. Okay, that's nice. Nice to see. Okay, so then we play bishop to f7. He cannot take because of attack, and then we give check and we go back to block. Cannot go back because then we can promote to a rook. But I mean, there are only two variations. I mean, what happens if you play this check? What happens here? We play king to c8, a very beautiful move, giving away the bishop, and he does not have any other checks. And whenever he takes the bishop, promote to a queen, and then after it moves, I mean, it's very obvious that we're going to win this game. We have an extra pawn and a queen as well. I really hope you like this position. I see you tomorrow with another one.